Hello, welcome to the 54th episode of the Spiritual Brainstorm. In this episode, I'd like to revisit and finish a bit the discussion that I started on alignment and duality. So, in the previous video, I was talking about the fact that we need to align in order to ascend to sort of this ultimate level where we become human and where we're connected to the intuition of a being that is bigger than us, where we are just one cell. And let us be guided by that being, whether it's a collective mind or something. It doesn't really matter what form you give it, but still rooted in um, in our 3D kind of protecting our body and the integrity of our body. I'd like to just make a few precisions. So first of all, most of us have a theme to our life and a certain duality or certain dualities, maybe plural actually, to deal with. So, one of my themes, for instance, was power versus powerlessness. Power versus powerlessness. Another duality, for instance, is rich versus poor. That's someone that I've been exchanging with, for instance, emails, is struggling with this concept of in order to get closer to God, you have to be poor and renounce all your riches. And all of these dualities are basically it's our kind of point of focus for who we are as a cell. And mastery over those dualities then makes you able to become a cell that is aligned in a higher being. Because so long as you have not integrated and transcended these dualities within you, then you cannot act as this cell in a higher being. And you don't have to master all dualities. This is almost impossible and is reserved for the likes of Buddha or Jesus. Arguably, the ascended masters have transcended and integrated all of dualities, and possibly they are a sort of a body. They are the being. They are the consciousness that is waiting there, like a fetus, basically, waiting for the cells to sort of materialize inside its body. That's our personal ascension, basically. And when they gain mastery over the dualities, which are the sort of theme for their life, for their incarnation. So one comparison I'd give is, for instance, if you have cells in the body, all cells are basically stem cells. So they can be anything. And then they specialize. And our specialization, I think, is linked to the dualities that each of us is struggling with, which makes us a sort of a master in that duality. Because once we've transcended it, then we're ready to be guided by a higher being that sends us commands on how to act in any given moment, because we've reached sort of balance in those dualities. And we don't have to master all dualities, because ultimately it's just like the specialization of the cells. Like some cells are white cells, and these are the cells that arguably have mastered, for instance, the duality of violence versus peacefulness or something. I don't know. Because they are meant to attack, of course, like invaders that come inside our body. But if they're not balanced, then they would start attacking even our own body cells indiscriminately. So that's the whole idea of integrating certain dualities, is what makes you ready to receive signals and intuitions from a higher being to act in a certain way which creates a coordinated and yet decentralized intelligence, like your body, basically. So all of your cells have done this via this process of first becoming a stem cell, and then imagine that, of course, there's this gap between stem and specialization. For us, it's seamless because the cells have sort of um, mastered this process of growing into the specialization, where we are zigzagging and stumbling and falling and creating mistakes because our level of reality is not yet kind of stabilized. Let's put it that way. So, and that's what I think, is this image of some Hindu gods where you have one hand, that is like peace, and the other hand like holding a knife, ready to kill you. It's it is this embodiment basically of a duality where you are right, where you're aligned right in the middle or balanced between um, disseminating love or peace and war and violence, basically, because you are sort of you understand that they're both sides of the same coin, and you are capable as a god, so to speak, to do one or the other, but not depending on your will, your own little will, and your rational sort of analysis of the situation, and but with instructions from above. And that makes it a divine act as opposed to a human act. It is that if you're a white cell, for instance, um, from the subjective perspective of cells, they can witness like a unicellular organism that enters our body, for instance, would say, "Oh my God, there's these other cells. They're so violent. They're terrible," and so it's the God manifesting this side of the coin, and then the white cells, from the perspective of other cells, like your own body cells, would be something that's propagating peace. And so each of us has its own duality to integrate and resolve. And then once you've become a sort of a master in that duality, then you're ready to fulfill a role, because all the other topics, for instance, like rich, poor, or whatever, that does not really concern you. And it's not like a theme for your life, and it's not something you focus on like proactively, your attention, or it's not something that is a theme in your life. So what it would be like is like some I'm sure you have like a friend, for instance, that just money is not even a topic that they would think about. Like they just know that they'll have enough money, and it's not a point of focus. It's not a point of worry. It's seamless. But your friend, for instance, may be obsessed with relationships between a partner, for instance, like finding this balance between his own freedom and being with someone else. And all of us have our own dualities and themes to deal with. And ultimately, I think that's what the personal sort of ascension looks like, is mastering those. And that's how each of us, I think, ascend, basically. And that's why it's really important to heal like past traumas, or things that you've from your past, basically things that bog you down. um what else was I going to say? Yeah, so this idea of being in the middle, though, don't get me wrong, it's it's not that you would feel like, for instance, if you are in the street and you are the one that had this theme of violence, you feel complete equanimity in killing someone or saving someone's life. It's more that you've made conscious what is in your unconscious, basically. And by doing that, you kind of how should I say, you know what the price and value of a life is, and therefore you kind of send a signal to the universe that you are ready to use this in a conscious way, basically, and not in an unconscious way. This power of, for instance, killing someone, or the power of manifesting, or the power to be rich or poor. You see, it's not like you've mastered the duality between rich and poor and now you can be a millionaire. It is that now you know what is the right amount of wealth that you should have according to any given situation, being a cell in that global organism. And so some people may that's why I think this image of the god that strikes you down, or kills you or saves you, is a bit overdone, because it's not about equanimity so much. It's more about consciously exploring the topic, and kind of defining your role as a cell. Then, like for instance, the white cell would master violence, the idea of violence, but it would find out the rules for when to use them and when to not use them, that are not focused, that are not dependent on like this antiquated good versus evil, or any kind of norms that it can understand, but rules that come from above, which is um, knowing that it's part of a global organism, and knowing who it has to save and who it has to kill. But something that is even beyond rationality, because from its perspective, it cannot have this kind of understanding of what the outside world is, what a human is. I mean, it's outside of its scope of understanding, but it still has figured out some kind of rules or morality for when to use it and when to not use it. And it's not something where you're in the middle, in the sense that half the time you kill or half the time you save people. That's a wrong kind of interpretation. It's more that you've explored it so much that you're ready to move on to a you've understood the concept so much that you're ready to trust a higher being, or a higher intuition coming from somewhere else, to use it in a way where you know that your unconscious or your traumas are not getting in the way. There, that's a good way of putting it. So for instance, if you haven't solved this duality of violence, for instance, then you wouldn't be able to tell if the intuition you're receiving comes from a higher being, or from your unconscious and from the traumas. You see? And so there you'd commit mistakes. Like, for instance, I don't know, the white cell was harassed in its childhood by red blood cells. And so once it matures, half the time it attacks people from outside the body, and the other half, it attacks red blood cells that bump into it. No, that's why, that cell needs to heal all its traumas, clear everything, and master these dualities in order to know where it receives this signal from consciously, the signal to do something, to act in a certain way within its specialized kind of area. So I think for us, these specializations are dualities, which are very general and generic. So it's not like, it's not tied to things like being a gardener, or what we think, gardener, or I don't know, a hairdresser or whatever. It's not those types of professional specializations that we tend to think of, and that are very limiting. It's more huge overarching themes like power and powerlessness. I mean, you can experience that duality almost everywhere. So thanks for watching. I hope this was interesting, and see you in the next video.